Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
It's our custom to go around and say our names, introduce ourselves. You can introduce yourself by first or first and last names. And as a suggestion for slowing us down instead of just blurting out our name, I'd suggest we take a breath and say, my name is, and then say our name. My name is Ray Dyer.
My name is Kei Matsuda.
My name is Shantan Kukan.
My name is Peter.
My name is Jeff.
I'm George.
My name is Cass Gray.
My name is Roy.
My name is Paul Kimball McGinnis.
My name is Papua.
My name is Rana.
I'm Jack.
My name is Richard Azzolini.
My name is David Axel.
My name is Mark.
Layard.
My name is Rob.
My name is Lee.
My name is Steve.
My name is Howard DePort.
My name is Mark.
My name is Andre.
My name is Chris.
My name is Paul.
My name is Noel.
My name is Vinny Kadat.
My name is Carl Wolf.
I am Freddie.
My name is Baruch.
Anybody else?
I'm Kaleo. My name is Kendall.
Welcome. Again, anyone else that came in late here for the first or second time today? Okay, so, yes?
I'm here for the first time.
Okay. So we have two newcomers, and just encourage people to be aware of new people and make them feel welcome. Our speaker today is Tempel Smith. Tempel has been practicing insight and metta meditation since 1989, including a year as a fully ordained monk in Burma. He's the founder of the Buddhist Alliance for Social Engagement House, a collective of socially engaged Dharma practitioners. In 2003, while directing young adult programs for the Buddhist Peace Fellowship in Oakland, Tempel launched the West Coast Teen Retreat Program that has become the Mindful Awareness for Young Adults, MAYA program. He is in the teacher training program at Spirit Rock and at the Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts. The title of his talk will be The Four Foundations of Mindfulness. Tempel.
So I'm going to give a handout today. If you could pass this around and have this side up first. The more useful side, probably. You could fan that out. So you can blank side up. So how many of you here have heard or read about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, have exposure to that. Okay. Well, good. One of the key texts in the Theravadan Buddhist tradition is this text on what is mindfulness and how to practice it and develop it, and how does it lead to enlightenment. Leads towards there, or actually all the way there to enlightenment. And I've heard the talk many times, but I found it hard to hold the information in a useful way. So I've given you here as a diagram of a little bit of an overview of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And for those of you who are visual learners, that will be helpful. If not, you don't have to look at it. And if at any point it seems too complicated, turn it over and enjoy the blank side. It may be more useful at times. And like any map, it's not the actual experience, and it's far too simplistic to expect that this is how their mind actually works. But I think it organizes the information well. It's like a map of San Francisco is not San Francisco, but when you're new to it, it helps. If you want to find a hard location, you can refer to the map, but otherwise you put the map away at some point and just enjoy the direct experience. So there are 4 places that we're supposed to bring our direct attention to understand the mind and understand the patterns that cause the mind to be free and develop further and further freedom. And then there are patterns that cause our self-suffering, unnecessary suffering in life. So there are 4, and I guess we can turn the map over at this point. So the first 3 of them are these 3 bottom circles, these 3 larger circles in the bottom. The M, the E, and the plus, minus. The M stands for the mind. The E stands for whatever experience you're having in that moment, that your mind is having in that moment. And then the plus minus is whether you find that experience pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So the mind is what you're using right now to take in this experience. So it's the ability to know what's happening, not know intellectually, but just receive sensory input. So you're taking in some light, you're taking in color, you're taking in sound, you're taking in the collection of the sight and the sound to create the context for what's happening right now. So your first-hand experience is really generated by the mind, and it's the direct experience of what you're having, what you're experiencing. So it's consciousness, that you can be conscious in every moment. It's the whole range of emotions that are present, playing through the mind. And it's all the cognitive processes that are happening, whether you feel clear right now or fuzzy, whether you're mildly irritated or whether this is very peaceful. Whatever state your mind is in, whatever state you are receiving experience in, that's the whole range of the mind. And the mind is never the same twice, like 2 snowflakes, I guess. It's always changing. In every moment, the mind is changing. If you look closely at it, you'll see that it's always changing. If you don't look at it too closely, it feels like it might be stable. It feels like you might have had a bad mood all day or a good mood all day. But if you look at it very closely, it's constantly changing. When you wake up in the morning, you're groggy. Then if you're a morning person, you wake up quicker. If you're not, you wake up more slowly. As you go through the day, depending on the experiences you're having and how the day unfolds, you'll find that your moods change throughout the day. Your ability to focus will come and go. Your ability to be peaceful or agitated will come and go. You can influence your mind, but you can't control it. You can't make it do what you want it to do, but you do have some influence over it. So that's the first of these circles, is coming into the direct experience of what your internal conscious realm is, moment by moment by moment. And you increase your capacity to know your mind moment by moment. So that might mean that if you had a difficulty being aware of when you were angry, so whenever you got angry, you'd obsess about what you're angry about, but you wouldn't know in that moment, oh, I'm angry. Anger would arise, you would lock on to whatever anger was telling you, and you'd struggle with it, and maybe after the fact, a day later or a month later, you go, oh wow, that was anger. But it's hard to wake up into the middle of anger, for example, or grief, or sadness. Sometimes joy can be so strong that you can't actually tell that you're feeling joy, you just have this sort of manic rush happening. And so more and more you develop the capacity to be concurrently aware, well, this is what's happening. I'm really focused right now. And it's starting to fade. And now I'm getting kind of blurry. So it takes some interest to know what's happening in your mind moment by moment, to see all the fluctuations. And you can try to arouse more calm if you're feeling agitated. You can try to arouse more focus if you're feeling scattered. But you can't control it. You can't nail it down. It's a very strong, dynamic system, how the mind unfolds. Next circle we're supposed to bring our awareness into is the realm of experience. So often this is talked about in the Theravada as the senses. So it's a collection of senses all put together that creates an experience. So when you say, I was having lunch with a friend, that's certain sights, certain sounds, certain tastes, certain thoughts were happening, all kind of coalesced into a large, more gross experience that you might call lunch with a friend. But if you look at it, it's built up of many small experiences all wrapped up into one. But our mindfulness isn't laser-like. We often meet experience on this more gross level. So we're driving to work, or we're at Thanksgiving dinner, or we're on vacation, or we're waking up and showering. If we're not right at the very sensory experience moment by moment, but we're sort of more in a larger context. As you develop mindfulness, you can begin to come right into contact with all the little elements that are making up a larger experience. And that's helpful in understanding what is actually pleasant about a certain experience. Like, oh, I had a good day. It's like, what was good about it? I don't know, it was just a good day. I'd love to have another one. Well, if you knew what it was that was actually good about the day, you'd be more likely to come in contact with that experience again. So again, like the mind is constantly changing, experiences are constantly changing. And you can't control the experiences you're going to have. You're driving to work and you can't control whether there's traffic or not. You get to work and you can't control whether your workmates have had a bad night the night before, or whether there's a sense of celebration in the office or where you're working, or the unemployment office, if that's where you're going for the day. You plan a vacation and you can't control what happens on that vacation as much as you might try. So experiences are constantly changing, and we can't control them. So these are two incredibly dynamic things that are meeting all the time. A mind that is constantly changing, coming in contact with experiences that are constantly changing. And that's the ride that we're on. That's the ride that we're given, is a life that is generally out of control, but not beyond influence, and one that is ever changing. Then the third circle here is whether that combination of the mind you have in the moment and the experience you're having in the moment, when they connect, is that pleasant or unpleasant or neutral? A simple example, you might see if you could have a pleasant experience, and only a string of pleasant experience, by buying 5 pounds of chocolate and eating it slowly. So it starts out pleasant. It doesn't matter what mood you're in, the first couple of bites of chocolate are pleasant, if you like chocolate. After a while, it's not so pleasant anymore. It becomes kind of neutral. If you keep eating the chocolate, it kind of makes you sick to your stomach. Next thing you know, you're having an unpleasant experience. Things that were pleasant yesterday may not be pleasant today, because your mind's in a different place. Or your mind might find itself going into a tired phase. So you're enjoying a bike ride, for example. And after a while, you start to feel a little tired. We have to bike all the way back home before you start. And after a while, it feels like work. And then it becomes an unpleasant experience as you're trying to get through that last mile. So this is also constantly changing. This is yet a third thing that's constantly changing. This pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. You cannot only have pleasant experiences. Yet that's what most of us are trying to do. Most of us are trying to see what we can do, given the state of things, is how to have the least amount of displeasure as possible. Unless there's certain... we're trying to have the least amount of unpleasant as possible. We're trying to see if we can get as much pleasure as possible. Maybe not being too addicted to it, but we're looking for pleasant experiences, or at least neutral experiences, and how to avoid unpleasant experiences. And yet we also can't control that. We can influence it, but we can't control that. So these are the first three of the four foundations of mindfulness. And in the text, if you're interested in the study of the text, the experience that the Buddha first wants us to come in contact with is the experience of the body sensations. So the E in the middle, when you're looking at the text, the first place he wants people to put their attention is on what do you actually feel in your body? What are the body sensations? But then later on in the text, he talks about opening up to all the senses and seeing all range of experience. Are there any questions so far? I don't mind taking questions during the talk if anything comes up.
What text were you referring to?
There are two texts. One is the Satipatthana Sutta is the smaller one, and then the Maha Satipatthana Sutta is the larger one. So those are they're in the canon, and the middle length sayings are the long discourses. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So, Satipatthana. Any questions?
Can you say more about the neutral experiences?
Yeah.
I've never really understood that. Experiences is like pleasant or unpleasant.
Well, what would you say your experience is right now? Pleasant or unpleasant? You can be honest. Oh, okay. But if you really look into it, you might always find there's a slight pleasure or a slight displeasure. But it can get so subtle that you really have to look very hard to see what it is. And so it's sort of a mild experience. Then there are times where you feel so much balance that's not really the dominant part of your experience. And some people call that, we say neutral, and in the text it's neither pleasant or unpleasant. So if you look at it, it's like, I wouldn't know if I'd call it pleasant, and I don't know if I'd call it unpleasant, but that's still a quality of the experience, and we end up calling that the neutral. And you might try that chocolate experience and start off pleasant, and at the point where it's unpleasant, and somewhere in the middle, it was probably neutral before it became unpleasant. What's interesting about this pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral is that in terms of suffering or awakening, it's really key to see whether your experience is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, because it will give you a lot of feedback of how you're responding to the experience you're having, and whether, as you're getting caught in suffering, you're getting caught around craving the pleasant, or developing aversion to the unpleasant that's happening, or you're becoming numb and checked out during neutral experiences. So that comes more in the how we construct suffering in that. That's a follow-up maybe later. So that's the first three foundations of mindfulness. And that's a lot of work just there, just trying to understand the play of your emotions, just trying to understand the play of how your mind is calm and spacious, or focused, or tired and scattered, and knowing those to better and better degrees, so that whatever you're experiencing, you can say with some confidence, yeah, right now I can feel a little bit of agitation, but mostly I feel peaceful. And developing that self-awareness.
So what are you doing that with? What is it that you're using to be aware of those things? If you're trying to be aware of your mind,
right,
what are you using to try to be aware of your mind with?
Also your mind. So your mind is multitasking. It's sort of like I can scratch my head, look at you, and consider the question at the same time.
But then can you be aware of the part that's trying to be aware of
the
mind?
Yeah. And then you can keep following that progression. You can be aware of, aware of, aware of, aware of, aware. It's not, I mean, it's kind of interesting, but it doesn't necessarily, well, I mean, actually there are meditative techniques where you keep watching the watcher, and you see that there's someone watching the watcher, and it's like, well, who's watching the watcher? That's another watcher. So you can kind of begin to track the direct experience of someone watching the watcher. But then you say, well, who is it that figured that one out? There's someone watching the watcher who's watching the watcher. And then you can see that one, and you can keep seeing that there are many, many possibilities of the mind. It's such an incredible thing. It's so incredibly powerful, more so than we can realize in our daily life, that you can be conscious of many, 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 many levels at one time when you're willing to sink into your concurrent experience. And when you get comfortable sinking into concurrent experience, there's sort of a first level of the mind, and then there are subtle back stories going on in the mind, a subtle irritation behind love. And if you didn't look that closely, you're like, yeah, I'm just doing so much love, but right behind there's a little buzz of irritation. You can feel that, and you can feel the calm behind the buzz of irritation around this upsurge of love. When you develop the capacity to sink more fully into your experience and know it really well, so you can pick out these many levels without going unconscious into whatever the experience is and not know it in the present moment. Just follow it out, whatever is happening. Not sure if that got to your question in satisfying way. So we get to the fourth foundation of mindfulness, and again, the first three are challenging enough. But we get to the fourth, and that's where a lot of patterns play out. There's a lot of little systems, and if you get into the texts, there's pages and pages and pages of other things to be mindful of. But really, you're being mindful of patterns, of how the mind is related to experience, and whether that's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So knowing these first three makes this fourth one much more possible. And what I have here is a pattern of practice of developing mindfulness that leads to awakening, enlightenment, or at least the reduction of suffering and the increase of joy from a Buddhist perspective. So the first thing we do when we're developing mindfulness is we learn to receive the direct experience before we react or intervene in whatever's happening. We learn to just receive it during formal practice. You don't have to live this way necessarily. When you're doing formal practice, you're asked to sink into whatever your direct experience is. It's helpful if you find a balance between relaxation and acceptance on the one hand, and an appreciation and curiosity on the other. So that if you get very relaxed, you might check out. So I'm very comfortable with what's happening right now, and so comfortable that I check out. Or I find it's very interesting what's happening, but that interest doesn't have a sense of calm, so there's a little bit of agitation with the interest. See if you can relax, and then within the relaxation, wake up to appreciate whatever it is. So if it's pleasant, it's not so hard. If it's mildly pleasant or pleasant, it's not so hard to relax and accept it and enjoy what it is. That becomes more challenging around neutral experiences because there's not really a charge there to hold you, or around unpleasant experiences where as you come into the unpleasant experience, the mind doesn't want to be there, you don't want to be there, it's unpleasant. So this ends up being the work of meditation, the work of mindfulness practice, is the willingness to accept whatever happens during that half hour or hour period that you're doing it. And just take a stand. No matter what happens, I'm not going to react against it. I'm going to first receive it as fully as possible. And if it's boring, I'll be bored. If it's neutral, I'll take in neutral. If it's exciting, I'll take in excitement. And if it's unpleasant, I'll take unpleasant. So that's the first part, receiving your experience. And it's challenging. You break a lot of habits in just the willingness to sit with what's happening as opposed to compulsively reacting to it, whatever that experience is. If you stay with anything long enough and you get more familiar with it, you can then drop into the experience. And it can either happen gradually or it can be a little more sudden, but you feel suddenly you drop into the experience and you more fully show up and commit to what's happening. You're dedicated to that moment. And that's where we go into the intimacy phase of mindfulness. When you drop into the intimacy phase, things become kind of fascinating. If there was a mosquito flying by, it'd be irritating, but you stop and you try to receive it, and it's buzzing in your ear, and you feel it land, and you're not going to swat at it as you're trying this radical act, and you can feel it poke in, and you wish it went there. That's the receptive phase, where you stop reacting, and you're willing to just let something come in and walk yourself through the experience, through a mildly unpleasant experience. If you have dropped into the intimacy phase, it's phenomenal. You can feel, you can actually hear the buzz of the wings of this thing. And the fact that it can fly at all is a miracle. And you can hear it getting closer and closer and closer, and then you can feel its little feet right on your neck. And you can feel it take a couple quick little steps. And it's not stepping anymore, and you know what's coming next. And then there it is, there's the shot. In. And then you feel it take out, and then you feel it take off, and it fades. That can be fascinating. If you can drop in what would have been annoying, is an astounding experience to have allowed yourself to go through all that. So even unpleasant experiences, that's a mild one, and it's very irritating, but the actual cost of it is pretty mild. You can do that. I did that when I had my appendix almost burst. It was horrible, but at some point I had to receive it because it was so dominating. And then I fell into this place where most of my friends were helping me get to the hospital and the doctors took over. It was so unordinary that it was just fascinating to be there, feeling the pain and seeing the medical system and feeling my friends rally to keep me company and the whole surgery and the whole... I actually enjoyed the experience. Once I got to the hospital, I found it interesting and compelling that my friends would show up and all that. So unpleasant experiences, if you're willing to be there for them, you don't have to avoid them. You don't compulsively have to avoid them. You have the option, if you go into them, there might be something valuable in unpleasant experiences. Same with neutral experiences. You can start with something as mundane as a bottle cap. And you're just about to throw it away, but you stop and you take it in. And then you feel all the little tines on the bottle cap. And then you realize that this was made by a machine and it had a very specific purpose. And it held in all the pressure of whatever it was containing, and then you twist it off. And then you discard it. But this tiny little thing is made of different types of metal. And as you get into that one little bottle cap of neutral experiences, it also opens up into something that could be fascinating and really hold your attention more than you would have imagined. So when you drop into this intimacy phase, it doesn't take as much work anymore to be present with whatever's happening. You can be drawn in. The sense of awe and mystery draws you in, and therefore there's a lot less work involved. And it's very pleasant to be present with even unpleasant things. There are meditations that I learned in Burma that were, meditating on dead bodies, and at first it's gross, especially if you can be present. You're really seeing the graphic nature of it, but then at some point you can be drawn into it, and then out of that comes this beautiful appreciation of life and how transient it is, how short it is, and then it becomes a beautiful experience. And then some of us struggle over pleasant experiences. I don't know if any of you've noticed that, but if pleasure gets too strong, it begins to put too much energy into our system, and there's a certain point where we can't take any more pleasure. It's too disorienting. And so there's even an upper range. You think, give me as much pleasure as I can get, but there's a way that it's hard to receive strong, full-body pleasure sometimes. But if you can drop into this intimacy phase, it's interesting, and you can be drawn further into pleasure than you had been before. And these things are constantly changing, like I said in the beginning. So when you get in this intimacy phase, you're in this incredible dance and play with life. And it's so fascinating, and it's ever changing, and it's rapidly changing. So it's very captivating. The next thing on the cycle over is what I have here is the fluid self, and the articulation of what the self is and what it isn't is very important in Buddhism, but it's a very slippery topic. And it's not that you might hear that there's no self, and that's a little too assertive in Buddhism. It's just that there's a self, but there's not a fixed self. There's not a permanent self. We are often trying to find comfort in predictable, permanent things you can rely on. You know, you want a well-built house because you want to rely on it. You don't want one that's going to fall apart in the next earthquake. You want a car that works well. You want relationships that work well. You want friends that work well. You want a job that gives you security. So we're often looking for things that we can depend upon, and that depending upon it, we want it to be somewhat durable. And yet the universe doesn't provide us with static things. The universe is a very dynamic place. So things may be durable in a way that they're very similar moment to moment to moment over some period of time, but all things change. They change slowly or rapidly, but all things change. And so the same ends up being true about who you are, that you are constantly changing. Not so much that your friends don't recognize you a day later, but if you see somebody 20 years later, they may not recognize you because you've been changing all along. And it's more like a river. It's more like you are a river more than you are a rock. You change with the seasons. If it rains, the river goes up and it goes down. The river is constantly carving its own riverbank and changing the shape of its own container over time. And that's what we are. We are sort of like the Mississippi River. You know, you can tell where it is, but it's a constantly changing thing. It's in a different place than it was 200 years ago. And that's what we are. If you can begin to align yourself with the changing nature of who you are, that's less predictable in a way. It's less reliable as far as I don't have to know myself tomorrow because I knew myself today. I'm hoping what I know about me is going to work for tomorrow, and what my friends know about me is going to work for tomorrow. So we can just kind of stop trying to figure me out. I'll stop trying to figure you out, and we'll coast for a while. And I won't have to learn anything new about you until suddenly I don't know who you are anymore, and all my maps of you are very old, and we don't feel very current in each other's lives. That's one of the problems with the fact that we are changing all the time. But we rely on this more stable, static interpretation of who we think we are, who we think our friends are, our family is, our country is, what the planet is. We develop static maps because they hold information well and they seem to be reliable. But we're in a very dynamic universe, and we're a very dynamic part of that universe. So as you bring this intimacy and willingness to be intimate with your direct experience, and you see that you're constantly changing, your emotions are constantly changing, your thoughts are constantly changing, your states of mind are constantly changing, the experiences you're having are constantly changing. What was pleasant for you a year ago isn't pleasant anymore. What was unpleasant 5 years ago, suddenly there's something to it that may be pleasant. You're constantly changing, all the way through. And as you know yourself better and better, you find that there's less and less of you that isn't changing, isn't in some process of evolving. So it's not that there is no self, but there's no permanent, unchanging self. The sense of change goes all the way through. And that's challenging when you are used to relying on static understandings of who you are, and you have to go into a changing one, and a changing one that doesn't just change for the weekend and then become static again. Once you start tuning into the changing nature, it keeps changing, and the depth of the change grows more and more, and your understanding of change grows more and more. And you have to change your whole paradigm of yourself into one that allows for inconsistencies, that when you change your perspective, they become consistent. The play of emotions, the play of thoughts, the play of desires, the play of interests. And then it becomes fascinating. Who are you going to be today? Who are you going to be when you walk out of here? What experience will you have when you walk out of here? Will the people you meet that were your friends yesterday, are they still your friends? Celebrate if they are, because who knows? And then people you haven't even met yet that are going to completely change your lives and bring so much love into your life. You haven't even met them yet. And that time is coming closer and closer to you. And then so with loss. That's also coming. So when we drop into this more fluid nature of ourselves, we become, I think, much more productive in a way. It's sort of like if you had 5 different shaped glasses, and you put water in one, and water would take up the shape of the first glass. Then you pour it into the next glass, and the water doesn't, because it's fluid, it doesn't remember the first glass. It goes in and takes the shape of the next glass, and the next, and the next, and the next. And that's how you might be able to live your life. When you're at home, you're in one frame of who you are. And you start driving, you go to work, and you're in another frame of who you are. Then you hit a weekend, and that's different. And you hit this thing, and that's different. And you can actually become adaptable and fit more and more circumstances. And you take the shape of that new circumstance. You meet it more fully. No matter what you put in water, water bends around it and becomes intimate with whatever you put in water, whether it's broken glass or apples or children's feet. Doesn't matter. The water will meet it all without bias. And your minds and hearts can be like that as well when you drop more into this fluid state. You're less hung up by things that happened yesterday. You can let them roll off and move on, and then meet this day fresh, and meet the next day fresh, and the next moment fresh.
What if you come into a circumstance, an external circumstance, that you feel is really harmful, either to the people that are in that context, or whatever. I'm in my own mind. I'm finding the analogy of the water in the glass breaking down in that sense. I don't understand.
Well, it does break down right there, and that's why there's another thing, which is the response. And I'm just going to jump into that and see if that gets to your question. The first 3 stages of these are kind of passive in a way. You're stopping compulsive reactivity. You're learning to be more feeling and more open to the experiences you're having, even unpleasant experiences. And that's sort of the water analogy, because it's not conscious. Water doesn't have an agenda. It just sort of is dynamic and fluid, and it will take whatever shape it wants, whatever shape is necessary in that moment. But we are actually more complex than water. We're not passive elements. And so when you get into this intimate, beautiful rapport with life, out of that comes these responses, these spontaneous responses to life in a way that water doesn't respond. If I fall over, the water doesn't get up and take care of me. But when you're in this beautiful fluid rapport, if, say, a child were walking by and it tripped, you'd be so open to whatever's happening that out of love you would tend to that child. But if you were talking on your cell phone and in a bad mood, and then someone tripped in front of you, it's like, I just can't deal. It's too overwhelming. I can't respond. And I say that having worked in crisis shelters for homeless and abused teenagers, that I used to be very proactive in trying to help. After a while, they're like, I don't know if I want your help. You're so proactive. You don't even know me yet. You're trying to solve my problems. And then I would back off, and that would feel kind of too distant, too remote. And I started doing these meditation retreats, and I found that I would just be intimate with the kids in the shelter. And they would learn to trust me, that I was totally present, but no agenda. And they needed that time to feel that was true for me. And then out of that would come a beautiful rapport. And then beautiful solutions to their homelessness would come out of that relationship building. And really the only things that worked in that shelter, the only things that truly worked long term, came out of relationship. No social worker came in with a formula that ever really solved a kid's trouble, because if they didn't relate to the kid, they could build this huge case plan, but it would all fall apart because they had never really found out who that kid was. And all that work would come kind of crumbling down. So until you're willing to build a rapport with a big problem and really understand and feel into what the dynamics are, your solutions probably won't fit whatever it is you're trying to solve. So there's crisis management, where you're just trying to get through the moment. But if you're trying to look at long-term solutions, it takes intimacy with long-term, with problems, social problems or environmental problems, to truly come into solutions that will address that problem. So there's some work for doing something immediate, but if you're looking at long-term solutions, they take relationship to understand what that will be. And it takes a willingness to sink down into the middle of often painful situations, feel them out, before out of that intimacy comes a type of solution, sort of a spontaneous arising out of patient intimacy. These solutions come. Like Gandhi's Salt March came out of a long period of meditation. And he was tired of strategizing, so he sat still for a month. And out of that came an aspiration to walk across India to collect salt, which was one of the final things that broke the British rule of India. So many of us feel that if we don't be reactive and proactive with life, that life will steamroll us. And this mindfulness practice, if you can take some time to stop reactivity and stop the habits and patterns that are governing your life, and settle down, settle into your body, open up your mind, relax some, let go of all the thoughts that are trying to organize everything, all the complexities. Take a breath. And then out of that spaciousness comes it ends up feeling a little bit more mystical where solutions come from. A little bit more intuitive can arise out of that space, because you're actually in relationship to yourself as opposed to just this busy management of your life. This crowded, busy management. And you're not checked out. No solution will come from being numb and checked out. No solution can come if you're totally bound. And there's no room for anything to change, because you've gotten your life so wound tight that nothing can change, or the whole thing has to fall apart. Or nothing can change if you're checked out. You have to come into your system, relax, become intimate with who you are, with your immediate life, with your greater life, settle into that. And then out of that comes a less egoic control of your life, and a more fluid responsiveness. And strange solutions come out of that would not have been predicted. They're non-egoic solutions. But they tend to work well with your environment. They tend to play well with others, because you're often feeling into others at the same time that you're feeling into yourself. And then this cycle can perpetuate itself. So if you're having a good morning and you're really into the morning you're having, when the afternoon comes around, that's how you'll approach your afternoon as well. And if you were angry and you were about to walk out the door and drive to work or answer the phone from an angry place, if you come into that anger, breathe a little bit, realize there's hurt under the anger, settle into that, feel the tenderness around the hurt, and come into that, and then walk out the door. You might see the beauty of the sunshine, whereas before there would just be that anger driving, and you would miss out on that. And then the driving would be frustrating. You couldn't find parking, and that would keep frustrating and frustrating. You can stay in a frustration loop, or you can build a more fluid, open, connective rapport to your inner world and also to your immediate outer world. So that's about sort of the whole of the talk, kind of a walk through the progression of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. There's a lot more intricacies about how this process goes and how to work with places you're stuck, specific places you're stuck, but that's sort of an overview of Theravada mindfulness and how it walks through letting go of patterns of suffering.
Tempel, can you talk more about the relationship between control and influence? You mentioned a couple times that we can't control the events, but we can influence them. I think was your term.
Yeah. I think because it's sort of like if I said picture your parents right now, either one. That's a request, and you can do it. So you can actually ask something of your mind, and it will perform. But if I said, I want you to only see your parents' face for 3 hours and have nothing else come in, no intruding thought, we can't do that because our minds will eventually lose the capacity to follow that task. So we can influence these things. If you're in a bad mood, take a deep breath and see if you can shake it off. Okay, I shook it off. I could shake off about 70%, but there's 30 I can't shake off. We can't get in and drive our lives as we drive a car. A car is a very mechanistic thing. Our minds are not that mechanistic and under our control. But they are completely within our realm to influence. So if we take the time to cultivate loving kindness, for example, we can influence the state of our mind so it's less angry and it's more loving. We can cultivate that. But we can't control it to where there's no anger unless we spend a lot of time cultivating it to the point where you let go of anger completely. So in trying to put it briefly, that's sort of what I would call the difference between control and influence. We often want to control experiences to determine the outcome, but there's so many variables into what's happening that we often can't control every one of them. And then the outcomes we get to through control tend not to be as satisfying as ones that we get to by allowing and influencing is a more harmonious route than control. I think one more little one on the left end.
Thanks for the diagram, it's very useful. I didn't like it when I first saw it, but I really like it now. The plus and minus, I'm wondering, I wonder if it's possible to bypass that for a newcomer, or is that a necessary thing to place a judgment on good and bad experience? It seems to strengthen the ego to do that, and I wonder if it's counterproductive in the long run to kind of reinforce these good, bad experiences rather than just taking them in without judgment.
Yeah, and that's a good question, because we might think of them as good, bad, but it's prejudgment. It's just that this is unpleasant. Like for Thai food, for example, it just happens to be pleasant. No matter what I order, I tend to enjoy the experience. And it's just to heighten a little more awareness. Are you enjoying this experience? Or you're not enjoying it? And it's already happening. So we're not trying to make it a good experience or bad. Sometimes we equate enjoyable experiences as good and unenjoyable experiences as bad. There's no judgment on it. It's just whether your system in a particular moment finds it enjoyable, whatever is happening, or finds it unpleasant, or finds it neither. I could take it or leave it. It's not all. It's in neither category. So getting clear on that, it's just a place to bring your awareness to something that's already happening. You're not supposed to make it pleasant or make it unpleasant or judge it as good or judge it as bad. It's just while you're having it, you just have to put a little feeler in to that level of experience and say, yeah, I'm here at the beach and strangely it's unpleasant. Why is that? Or I'm walking a dog and this is pleasant. And it's not necessarily calling it good or bad. It's just feeling that one level. And then I put it on the map because the Buddha put it on the map. So I'm just trying to be true to that teaching. It ends up being very important, that part. Not so much in the mindfulness part, but when we get into suffering, the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral part of experience is very key to how and why we create suffering. Yeah. But that's a follow-up. Thanks for your question.
Will you be available to stay and talk to people if they have questions after? Okay. This would be a good time to close. Do we have a host?
Yes. My name is Tage Loya, and I'm your substitute host for today. There's some baked goods and fresh fruit outside. Please also enjoy tea. If you can, wash, dry, and return your cups to the rack when you're finished. I'm going to be passing around a Dana bowl as well, and we accept contributions to cover our expenses. The suggested donation is $5 to $8. Certainly more if you can. There's a newcomer sign-up sheet. If you wish to receive the newsletter, please write down your name, address, and email address. And then finally, often some members go out to lunch after the meeting. The group usually meets near the front door around 12:30. Thanks.
Are there any announcements? Yeah.
We do have a booth at the Castro Street Fair, and it's on Market Street. It's right across from the Coal Banker real estate office. So if you're around Castro this afternoon for the fair, you can drop by and say hello, and we'll see you.
Yeah, we are right next door to the Christians. They're all purpley and we're all rainbowy. We're red, saffron, whatever. Our temple, it's just been a delight to have you here again. Thank you for this presentation, really rich. Next week, our presenter is, I think I got it right, is Dave Rico. I believe is coming next Sunday. Who's our guest Dharma presenter.
Anybody else have an announcement? Okay, then we can stand in a circle and close.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, and live believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.